How you doing, everyone? I've been asked to provide some feedback on my Salt Chlorine Generator. As it's been a year since I've installed it, people want to know if I feel that this is better than the conventional method of the liquid or powdered chlorine that I've been using up until a year ago. Any thoughts that I have with regard to tips for success in using this device, and I have information to share. As my inspection cell light is turned on, I figured now would be a good time to set up the camera as I go through my regular maintenance of this device, for which I already have a video on doing maintenance on the cell. I think there's more to it than that. The inspection cell should be a reminder to take a good look at everything. But that's not what this video is really about. I really want to talk about what I believe are some things you could do before you get the generator installed, or if you already have a generator, that will really help you with regard to maintaining good chemical levels in your pool and having a better positive overall experience with your Salt Chlorine Generator. So let's get started. First and foremost, I tell everybody this when they consider putting in one of these devices. The box right here should really be somewhere visible. It should be somewhere where every time you walk past the pool area, you're able to see these indicator lights. When you have a problem with the pool pump, or the pool pump's not turning on, anything is out of the ordinary on the pool pump, you can hear it. There's some sort of feedback. On this device, when it's not working, the only way you know is the pool turns green, right? There's no active beeping alarms to tell you that there's anything wrong with it. I have this right there at the front door. If anything were to go wrong, as you can see, just something like the inspection cell light, a no-flow indicator, the salt levels are off, immediately I'm made aware. I'm able to solve this issue. I see a lot of these are installed on the side of a house. You really got no idea what's going on with this unit when it is not working. Consider the following scenario. I just adjusted the pump. I made the RPMs low enough that it no longer triggers the flow switch, which shut off the generator. And there's no chlorine being produced. And this could go on for days if either the pump were too low, as I did in this case, or perhaps there was an obstruction. The cell got filled up with leaves, debris, and whatnot, which further restricted an already low pump. As it fills up with debris or gets calc on it because of the hard water, the generator will fill up and it'll restrict the flow. Eventually, no flow turns on and stops generating. I can immediately see that. I can immediately remedy the situation. Another thing worth noting, while this box may be water resistant when closed, definitely not water resistant in Florida when open with the sideways rain, I definitely wouldn't want this thing sitting in the sun. I've seen the components inside. Yeah, definitely have this in the shade. And this might seem somewhat subjective, but this is my opinion. Go big on the cell, again, especially in Florida. We can see this one right here says for pools up to 40,000 gallons. Mine's a 12,000 gallon pool, and I have nonetheless elected to get the T-Cell 15. The reason being is, just like on anything else, I'd rather go bigger and run a lower duty cycle than get the smaller one and run a larger duty cycle. I think that overall is better for longevity, even though you're paying more for the bigger cell. It's just a better idea. I wouldn't want a smaller engine running at redline all the time. I would rather have a bigger engine running at a more conservative RPM. So that's just basically the premise here. So I went with the bigger cell. One last note with regard to installation. It is of critical importance that this flow switch, this flow detection switch, be installed in a correct position. The book makes mention of how to do this. It shouldn't be skipped. This should be done correctly. You're going to have lots of problems getting that flow detection to work right, especially on low speeds, if this is not done properly. If you're not sure how to do this, right, if you're having a professional do this, I'm sure they know how to do it. If you're installing your own salt chlorinator, take heed. Don't get lazy on this step. Make sure this is done correctly. As part of my regular maintenance, this box gets shut off. The power's already been shut down on this box. Just a matter of time before the capacitor is discharged, and there it goes. So I'm going to start on the maintenance of this unit, and what I'm going to do on this box is a couple of things while I work on the Salt Chlorinator, and that's a general cleaning of this unit, as well as something I'm going to do with the connectors. Here's the cell removed, and as we look inside, we can see the calc built up. I should point out that if you do run a bypass for whatever reason, right, because there is a bypass setting on this unit, if you felt the need to do some maintenance on the pool that you didn't want the water getting in there but to recirculate, that would mess this up really quickly, right? Consider the fact that unfiltered water would recirculate through here and into this. So take note of that. If you're getting a salt chlorinator and for whatever reason you're running what they call recirculate on this type of setup, for whatever reason, that it will all get stuck in here. That said, we look at this one and it's calc, right? And not only will calc reduce flow, but calc does not produce salt, right? So not only will it slow it down, but the performance of salt production will be significantly reduced. So I'm going to just do my regular cleaning regimen. Again, there is a video for this already while we do some other tasks. That brings me to another tip for success. Make sure you get one of these cleaning stands and don't follow anything on the internet with garbage bags or sandwich bags or whatnot. Spend the $15, $20, get yourself a proper cleaning stand. I'll let that simmer for a while I continue my video here on the review of the Salt Chlorinator and my tips for success in using this chlorinator. Figure while the cell is doing its thing, this can be cleaned up, and the reason is that if I do this at least every 3 months, this is cleaned. It can only get 3 months of dirt accumulation on it. You could elect to remove the cover and always be able to monitor it, but folks who have kids may want to have that cover on. When kids are out by the pool, they don't want them touching any of the buttons. Then you could lock it. There's also a provision actually for a lock itself to keep people out. You could also mount it up a bit higher. There is a finite amount of cable here that comes off the cells. But the closer the pump is to the area that you're going to be mounting this, the more freedom you have to make that choice. And as I continue on, I have to look down at my stopwatch. I have 10 minutes. I don't know how much time I got left. It'll go off. In the background, I got that acid eating away at the calc on the salt chlorinator. Now, me personally, I take it a step further. I don't recommend this for everybody, but I like to just have a look inside. I also like to re-terminate the connectors for the two snap-in connectors, one for the flow sensor, the other one for the cell, just because it cleans those connections by connecting them and disconnecting them. So I will do that now. Right, just a quick inspection here. So some debris here on top of this capacitor, but it was on top of the capacitor. It's not from the capacitor. But again, it's always good to check and make sure. Again, if you don't know what you're doing with electronics, you should not be in here. I'm just displaying this for you for your benefit or entertainment. That's it. Okay, so what I'm doing, so you can see, is I just simply unplugged and plugged it back in. There's no power. I've cut off mains power to this unit, right? So unplug and plug back in. That's it, nothing more. And then this one down here we can see unplug and plug back in. So what I'm looking for, I can see a fuse, two large electrolytic capacitors, and an extremely large thermistor right here, right? That's what I'm looking at. Make sure that's okay. Smaller electrolytic capacitor. Everything here seems fine. Everything looks nice and clean. No animals have moved into the box, especially if you're not in a covered area. That's okay. I'm going to close it up. Again, if electrical stuff is not your thing, you could disconnect and reconnect these connectors without having to go into this back panel, right? This is just if you know what you're doing, you want to make that extra inspection. So I don't encourage people to do that if they're not sure what they're doing. The cell is clean, ready to be put back in after the O-rings are lubricated. And we're up running again. We're back in business. The cell is just coming up now. And having finished all of my maintenance tasks, I've earned the right to hold down the diagnostic button for 3 seconds and shut off the inspect cell, and we are good for another 3 months. I want to talk about salt for a minute and how it correlates to this main screen. This could get lost on people. The main screen is an average. It is not an actual. There's also an actual in here. Mine reset, having turned the unit back on, powered it back up. The instantaneous is shown with a dash right here. We'll see what happens as it finds itself. It just turned on, started running. And that's the other thing. We can see it's dropping right now. It's going to run for a little while. When you add salt to the pool, it's not going to be instant gratification. You don't want to go and dump an entire bag at a time because the number drops. I actually use a small stainless cup like this. As the numbers start to drop, they're supposed to be between 2,700 and 3,400. Again, I don't know if that's my number. I'm going to let this thing run for a while. We'll see what it brings. And I throw about a cupful of salt in different sections of the pool up in the air, not clumped, so it dissolves quickly, and wait a couple hours for the average to drop. You definitely don't want to be dropping an entire bag at once, because the reaction of this number is simply too slow. There is a means by which you can reset this average, but it's really not necessary. The level by which you can keep your salt 2,700 to 3,400 is such a wide range that it should be absolutely no problem if you see it starting to drop down, to add a couple of scoops of salt and throw it up in the air into your pool and walk away. After a couple hours, you see this number move to a more acceptable value. You leave it alone, you're good. We can see the instantaneous value continues to drop as the generator runs, now down to 2,900, now down to 2,800. And what that is going to do is that is going to drop this average. This average is just going to keep going down, 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 down. It's probably going to drop down to 2,800 because that's what my number was when I shut it off, and it's going to stay there, right? So I'm going to end up having to add salt. We'll come back in a little bit. Also, with regard to what I just said, you should use some common sense. I have a 12,000 gallon pool. If you have a pool that's 4 times the size, this little tiny cup might be inadequate. Maybe a small bucket might be in order. If you have a pool that's 10, 15 times the size, maybe an entire bag might be in order. So do the math yourself when deciding what's an appropriate amount of salt to add to your pool in small increments when your salt level starts to drop. Eventually, you will get a feel for how many scoops you need to bring your salt level into compliance. It'll just become second nature. For those who are just turning up a new system, I caution you, when you look at the size of these bags, it does do a good job to give you an idea of how many bags it would need to bring your pool to a certain level of salinity. But what you want to do is get that salt chlorinator going first and find out what the base salinity of the water actually is in your pool before you start dumping, like 8, 11 bags of salt into your pool. Don't be rushed to get the salt chlorinator up and running. If you're really that concerned, throw a couple bags of shock in there, some liquid chlorine or whatever, and call it a day. What you don't want to do is end up with so much salt in the pool that there's too much salt for the chlorinator to operate. Remember, it's always easier to add salt than it is to remove salt. So add a couple bags of salt. The chlorinator will still turn on briefly to test the salt level. Add a couple bags of salt and see where you're at, and then add another bag of salt, see where you're at, and see how it's climbing per bag in your pool as you turn it up. And that'll give you an idea of how many more bags you need to add to get your pool within those parameters of 2,700 to 3,400. What you don't want to do is follow this as gospel, because if you end up getting like 5,000 parts per million, you can end up having to drain a third of your pool and putting fresh water in to drop your salt level, and that's no fun. When we conduct the general maintenance on the actual cell and we keep the salt levels within the appropriate settings, knowing that one of the byproducts of the salt chlorinator is the increase in the acid levels of the pool, which could be controlled with soda ash. It's worth noting. Other than that, if you keep those values good, chlorine levels, I have found, stay stabilized throughout the entire year. Once in a while, I find it necessary, if a lot of people are in the pool, I will go and I will bump it up to superchlorinate, which will automatically shut up after 24 hours. And what that does is it will change the cycle to 100% for 24 hours and constantly generate chlorine. I generally keep mine for my pool at only around 22% because I have that large cell. I have gone the entire summer ensuring that there's no red lights or anything like that on this box, monitoring my chemicals, of course, to make sure that my chemicals are in order, only making minute adjustments as necessary on this dial to keep the chlorine in check. If it's a little low, crank it up a little high, crank it down a little. If we have a major event with weather, I'll drop it up to superchlorinate to sort of shock it, if you would. And never had an issue here in Florida with the pool turned green all summer long. Never had an issue. And before I got this salt chlorinator, That has never happened. There's always been a situation or two, or I've gone away or whatever. I've gone away for a couple weeks at a time, and while other chemicals have gone out of balance on this pool, chlorine has never been an issue. I've never been a slave to the chemicals of this pool as I've gone away. Now that I have this generator where I have to go and flush the entire pool, the whole pool turned green, or algae has formed on the bottom. It just doesn't happen for me anymore with this system. It has definitely improved the experience of owning a swimming pool and reduced the constant vigilance I require in Florida, having a pool without a screen enclosure over it. That said, having a system like this should never be a replacement for checking your chemicals. What you find is having a system like this just makes the chemicals stay in the right levels much easier than manually addressing your chlorine by pouring it in the pool or dumping powder in the pool. This does a much better job, I have found. There might be people who disagree with me, but this is my observation after running this for a year, is I can get through an entire season and never have the water foul in the pool, including the summer in Florida. And that is just simply not a thing unless you are constantly vigilant every single day monitoring the chlorine levels in the pool. And this also means, from a logistical perspective in Florida, that if you have days with extreme sun or lots of rain or what have you, more trips to the store, picking up those yellow jugs and going down to the store, filling up more chlorine in jugs to dump into the pool, because the chlorine is just boiling off too quick. And now it's just like, okay, turn up a dial or flip to superchlorinate, or every now and again just spending $7 and going and pick up one of these bags down at Winn-Dixie or Home Depot. The amount you spend on one of these bags lasts a lot longer than those jugs of chlorine that you have to schlep back to your house. So would I recommend the Salt Chlorine Generator to everybody who owns a pool? Yes. Yeah, I recommend it to everybody. I would, and I do. I think, especially in Florida, everybody I talk to who doesn't have one, I say, hey, you should really investigate this, because I've had nothing but success with it based solely on that. I think it's the way to go, both for ease and economics, for the purchase of chlorine that's saved, for the not having to keep those caustic chemicals around and replace them with simply what is kosher salt in a bag for pets, for kids, and what have you. It's total cost of ownership, ease of use, ease of maintenance, all the reasons to switch over to it. I tell people who have a swimming pool to investigate this. With regard to installation, do I think it's something everybody can install? Absolutely not. I installed mine. I don't think most people are able to install this. Very limited amount of people are able to install this. I would agree that a qualified person should install this unit, probably a pool service. But when they do, you tell them that you want this box in a covered area if possible, in clear view, as I had described in this video. Believe me, it will improve the overall performance of this chlorine generator. So I hope you found this video on my thoughts on the Hayward Salt Chlorine Generator and some tips and tricks for success helpful and entertaining, and whatever you found on it. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. Would you like to reply?